Welcome to the Step Up podcast. Today's episode is going to be part one of a series in the prosthetic design, and we're going to be talking about test sockets. My name is Scott Baranek. I'm a certified prosthetist, and I am here today with Nate Kapa, also a certified prosthetist, and he is with Bremer Prosthetics, as well as myself.
You said we're going to be talking about test sockets. So, I guess it's probably important for us to describe what a test socket is, first and foremost. So, a test socket is going to be, a word I use a lot is a prototype. And that's kind of what you want to think about it. This is kind of like the way that we can kind of focus in on the design of your prosthesis to make sure that it's fitting and functioning properly before we build your prosthesis, right? So what's different between the test socket and, like a definitive or even a preparatory prosthesis?
A lot of things. The test socket, for one, it's clear. You can kind of see through there. We get an idea for it's not made for long-term use. We have it's adjustable. It's plastic.
Right.
The block is more. We can move it around. That type of thing. So basically, it's made to adjust. It's more adjustable.
Right. And so the thing is that we can change it so that like the pressure on your leg feels like it's in the right spots, and we can make it so that the foot feels like it's in the right place.
Right.
So that when you're standing and walking, that and we can do the two most important things for a prosthesis. We can make sure that number one, when you put your weight on it, it holds you up.
Yep.
And number two, when you pick your weight up off it, we make sure that it stays on.
Yep.
Right? Those are the two most important things with a prosthesis. People ask me all the time, what are the first things that you're looking for? Well, the first thing I'm looking for is that it keeps you up. Yep. The second thing I'm looking for is that it stays on.
Yes.
Once we've got those things, now we're going to work on comfort. Now we're going to work on, control and optimizing things. But really that test socket is kind of, when I'm talking technically, a test socket is it's a device. It's a part, right? It's something that physically exists. But I also think of it as more of a process.
Right.
Right. And we use those test sockets in, what I call an iterative process. So this is our time that we can try different things to see what works best for the person.
Yes.
Whether it's different ways of holding it on, whether it's different, gel liners,
right.
Whether it's different prosthetic feet and doing comparisons between how this foot functions versus that foot functions, or knees, or any of those things. It's really, the test socket is the most important part of our design process.
Right.
Is that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, this is our time to experiment with different components and see how the patient responds.
Right.
And kind of like you mentioned, this is our actual design process.
Right. A way to think about it is it's kind of like a real world test drive of a prosthesis. Right. So you're coming into the office, you're getting the test drive. Now, especially for somebody's definitive prosthesis, what's the difference between kind of looking at that as a short-term test drive versus like maybe a long-term extended trial of that?
Well, if you mean like short-term, like coming into the office and just walking up and down the parallel bars, or taking it home and wearing it for a week, right?
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of times people say if they come in and they walk up and down the parallel bars, that'd be great if the world was flat,
right,
and we had parallel bars everywhere we went.
How often do we have people that come into the office, especially when it's new, and say, boy, I wish I had these bars in my home?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. If that was the case, and that's what the world was like, that would be great, but that's not suitable for real life scenarios. You need to kind of take it. I always say you got to wear the prosthesis and take it through what you're going to go through in a daily encounter.
Right.
At least for the definitive prosthesis.
Right.
At that point, we're trying to design the prosthesis that's going to best suit you and your lifestyle.
Right. Right. And I like to tell people, it's so often that, something new has a higher level of comfort just because it's new pressures on your leg. It's new. It's not the same experience you had. Obviously, especially when you're looking at, getting your second prosthesis, when you're down the road, and you're going through this process, and you're not doing that because things were great with your prosthesis. You're doing that because you had problems.
True.
So that very first time you put that new test socket on, it can be just a sense of relief of, oh, I don't feel those problems anymore. This is so much better.
Yep.
But we've all had the experience where we're in a shoe store and these shoes feel like they're the most comfortable pair of shoes that we could ever imagine.
Yep.
And then we get home and the next day we put them on and think, well, geez, what was I thinking? This is rubbing here, and the arch isn't in the right spot, or there's this problem or that problem, right? And so I like to tell people
24 hours of friction takes
24
its toll.
Exactly. So, I like to kind of set the stage on for those people to say that that's great that it feels good right now. But when you come into the office, when you walk into the office and can tell me that same thing with the test socket, that's when we know that your prosthesis is ready to be made.
Right.
When you can come, not when you leave the office and say this feels great, when you can walk back into the office for your next appointment, we can say this feels great.
And something you and I tell people is we want you to be highly critical.
Right.
We want you to look for problems.
Correct. Yeah, this is the time to explore, right? This is the time to ask questions. Not that it's always the time to ask questions, but this is really the critical time to ask questions. I have so many times people say, well, I don't want to complain. Please do.
Yeah.
Please complain all the time, but especially during this test socket period, think about the complaints.
Yeah.
Put those first in your mind so that we can work together for solutions so that those don't stay nagging complications that you have.
I mean, if you have the same problem and you didn't complain now, but you do when it's the laminated carbon fiber socket, we have a lot less options to adjust it at that point in time than we do with the test socket. So.
Right. So how do we design a test socket?
You mean like how we make it? We take a cast, and then we take a plaster model, we modify that, and then we take a piece of plastic and we shape it to the model and we vacuum form it.
So when you say we modify the model, what does that mean?
We usually do plaster buildups where we need to make reliefs inside of the socket. We can take a rasp and we will sand down where we need to increase pressure.
Right.
Those types of things.
I often explain to people that when we take a cast of somebody's limb, they're sitting in one position, not weight bearing. So that's a static, non-weight bearing representation of their limb. If they were just sitting in that position, that cast would be perfect, for them to use every day. But that's not the condition that we're really looking for this prosthesis to flourish in. We're looking for it to flourish in the time when they're putting their weight through it and when they're moving. So those pressures in the socket are going to be changing through kind of as the limb goes down and settles down into the socket, as the weight transfers from the heel to the toe of the prosthetic foot. All these pressures change within the socket. So we have to take that cast and we have to manipulate the cast so that we're making sure that soft tissue areas are the places that are carrying pressure, and bony prominences, that places that are pain centers for people, or places that skin breakdown is more likely to occur. All those things are kind of a little bit offloaded so that those don't get that same level of pressure.
Right.
So I mean, we have to go in and physically. This is the part of it that it's still kind of less science than art.
Yes.
In terms of that modification process,
Right.
And so even though we think, we look at that model and we say, well, we're the best artists and this is exactly how I want it to look. Boy, we should test it first, right?
Right.
We want to make sure that it's not our opinion that really matters. It's the person who's going to be using it. So this whole test socket is kind of being done so that we can continue to refine that design, that art through collaborative, through a collaboration.
I mean, this is the part though that really sets us apart from one another though. It makes us all individual as professionals.
Right.
I mean, you and I will talk about, how we modify things and where we, whether we do things more distally, and we were talking about, last year, different seminars we've been through and what our modification techniques are, whether we want to take more off the distal or build more up and, do different things, and how we compare that to, other people and how they do things, and whether you want to take those, people using casts and how tissue manipulates differently, or whether you do that with, digital things that people have available nowadays. And, there's a lot of different ways to get those models. And how people modify those. They're not doing that all with plaster. That's just one of the things that we're talking about doing. People are doing that with...
with CAD or different software systems or algorithms.
3D printers now. People are, they're expanding into that area. So there's all different, so again, it's those things that sets us apart, and, people have different, ways of going about that. And that's what, what our profession is. That's where you're talking about the artistic part of it. That's what we're all, how we apply that is, is what we do as prosthetists. So
Yep. So the test socket's been made. It's all ready. During that first appointment, what are you looking for? Like as a prosthetist, what are you looking for during that first?
I want to go back to another key part of the test socket too, though. Now we got the socket block and where that is in relation to, which is going to be where the foot placement is in relation to the socket. And that has everything to do with where that weight's going to transfer in relation to the foot, where it hits the floor in the socket, and that's going to have everything to do with how the socket's going to feel and how we're going to feel those pressures inside of the socket, how that foot, those ground forces are going to react when we put our weight through the prosthesis. There's different ways that we can set that up as well. There's some of these places will have like a locking mechanism that sets right up underneath and is centered. There's different socket blocks we can put in different places because people have different alignments. If somebody has a flexion contracture, we have to do a lot of different things to accommodate those different things. So again, evaluating the individual and finding out firsthand what we have to do to accommodate that. There can be different things that we need to do to address specific needs as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so typically for me during that first fitting, the first things I'm looking for, I mean, obviously, are you able to put on and take off the prosthesis? Do you need assistance for that? Can you do it by yourself? I mean, this is one of the very first things. I mean, being able to put it on by yourself. A lot of people have to learn that. Like the very first prosthesis, you're likely to need some help. It's likely assistance, but our goal would be that as this process goes on, by the time you're getting your definitive prosthesis, you're able to do this independently. So that's one of the first things I look for is, okay, can you put this on by yourself? Can you take it off by yourself? The next thing I kind of have a roadmap for when I do this, that I follow a specific template at the very beginning just so I make sure that I'm checking all the boxes. Right? The next thing would be, are you able to stand up? Can you get up out of the chair? Do you need help to get out of that chair? Or are you able to do it by yourself? Either one of them is okay, but we just want to know where this baseline is. Okay, so you got up. Now can you establish and maintain balance? So the first thing that we look for is what we call a static alignment. We want to make sure that your hips are level to the ground, that you don't feel like you're falling forward or backwards or being pushed one way or the other. One leg's not longer than the other. All these things. And once we have that and there's a comfort level there, then we start to look at kind of how is the pressure mapped inside the socket during standing. Do we have this? A lot of times we'll take a physical probe and actually probe the inside of the socket and feel, is there uniform, pressure on the limb, or are there points of pressure, especially over bony prominences? A lot of times we can use these tools to diagnose areas that might be painful pressure later before they become painful pressure.
And this is a good time too. We can look at, like you're talking about, seeing that initial, when they're establishing their balance, do we have equal weight from the toe to the heel while they're transferring their weight over to the prosthetic side?
Yep. So I mean, kind of after we know that the person, okay, they're standing up, they're reporting, I don't feel discomfort standing, or if they do, it's taking that test socket back, making physical changes, and then getting to the point that they don't feel that they feel confident about how it feels to them. At that point, then we start to walk and do gait analysis. Start to like you were talking about, reposition that foot, whether it's whether it's using components that luckily in this day, when I started my career, boy, we had to be pretty creative about components and about moving things. And it's like we're not at the point where but boy, most of the things that we used to say I wish I had, those things exist now.
They do have a lot available now, don't they?
Boy, our toolbox has really expanded compared to what it used to be. And I try to use these parts during test socket fitting. So that once the person's prosthesis that they're going to get, whether it's a preparatory or definitive prosthesis, doesn't require those kind of extra parts or extra pieces that. But during a test socket fitting phase, like those parts are fantastic because they can really expedite the process to getting that design to where the person can use it.
Well, if you can use them during the test socket fitting process, but then neutralize it, you still have maximum adjustability when you deliver the definitive prosthesis.
Exactly. And I mean, if really things went bad and you needed to use them again, you could. When you design it to have it included, you can't use it again.
Yes.
Yep. And so we're looking for all that gait. We're looking for really, to optimize your gait pattern. I mean, some people have habitual gait deviations. Some people, walk with a limp, but we're really going to make sure that we get things to a position that you're walking the way that you walk, and then maximizing your ability to do that in a comfortable way, right?
Right. Yep.
So I mean, what things signal to you that an adjustment is needed? And then how many adjustments does it take?
Well, it varies, right? I mean, they could be dipping on the prosthetic side. Very basic,
right?
But leg could be short,
right?
One of the things that we look for is we're looking at we watch from the heel to toe, and if they're getting an early heel rise, we're looking at possibly we might need to plantar flex the foot,
right.
Or maybe we're not getting a heel rise at all. We're looking for indicators. Is that pylon medial-laterally varus or valgus? Certain things. There's a lot of things that can indicate. Whether we need to move the foot forward or backwards. A lot of times we can see something that would show us, one or two different symptoms, and we have to maybe try both to eliminate one of them. It's not necessarily a straightforward thing.
It's like I said, it's an iterative process, right?
Yes.
Trial and error is it's kind of a layman's term for what this process is, right? But this is a controlled environment where we can try things and see what their impact is. And then either decide to, if it's positive, include it in the design. If it's not positive, hey, we're going to go back to how it was before, and we're going to try a different way of solving the problem.
Yeah, I'm glad you said the trial and error, because I would rather try both and see which one gives us the better response than get to the final product where we don't have the adjustability and say, I wish I would have done that.
Right. Or even worse, obviously we take it very personally, so we think a lot when that happens, but we really want to instill the confidence in the person that's going to be using this prosthesis also, that they've been through the experience, that they've tried different things, and that the way that their prosthesis is made for them with purpose.
Yep.
And because it's the best way that it can be made for them. To kind of start to eliminate those, sometimes alignments don't look by the book. Right. Sometimes it looks quote unquote wrong, right? I mean, how often do we see things and we say, if you walked into a lab and looked at it on the bench, you'd say, boy, I don't know if that could be right. But then the person puts it on and they take, if they put pants down, and walked, you'd never even know that anything was out of the norm whatsoever.
I mean, if that residual limb is abducted, that foot needs to be flat on the ground when it hits the floor.
Right.
And to do that, we have to accommodate those angles.
Right. So I mean, it's not uncommon for somebody to think, boy, that doesn't look right to me.
Right.
Right. And to maybe have that doubt in their mind of, well, this looks not centered, so maybe it's not right.
Right.
But that's why it's important to try the other things.
Right.
So that person can see, well, I tried it on center, and even though it might look more right, boy, it didn't feel right when I stood.
Right.
Boy, I couldn't walk on that.
I don't think what people don't often see those, they don't know what their skeletal structure looks like underneath their tissue and their skin.
Exactly.
Because we don't see that like they do maybe the pylon in the foot that they're looking at with the prosthesis.
Right.
And our body isn't made of 90-degree angles.
No.
So it's not straight or perpendicular. There are curves to it, and we're trying to accommodate those things that they're looking at, that's why when we put the cover and skin on it, all of a sudden those things are covered and you don't see that anymore.
Right, right. So, we've gone through this whole process of test socket fitting, and as a clinician, we feel like, hell, this is looking pretty good. This is doing really well. What are the signs that we're looking for to make sure for us to feel confident that it's time for this person to get their prosthesis? What are those cues?
Well, I think the big one would be the patient coming in and they're not asking for adjustments, or they're feeling confident in the prosthesis. That, we ask them to come in and be critical, right? And they're not reporting any issues with the prosthesis. That's the biggest one.
Right. A lot of times also, during that evaluation process, when we're starting this, we're likely to kind of ask people about their goals, right? Like, okay, what goals do you have, whether they're short-term, long-term? Like, we're going to build this prosthesis for you. what do you want to do with it? You know, when they can come in and report that I was playing with my grandkids, or I ran with this, or I did these things that we talked about at the beginning, and I've achieved those goals. I really focus on that also. You know, those two things of them saying, hey, I can put this on, whether I'm using it all day long or, you know, the period that's right for me, I'm able to use this in a way that meets my demands, and I'm doing the things that I want to do.
Right.
To me, that means, okay, it's time for us to make your prosthesis. You've stabilized. We know we can be confident that we've optimized this to the point that you're going to be successful with it.
Now, what if we get them to that point, but they're in 10-ply socks?
Well, I think as a clinician, that would be something that we have to use our clinical judgment to say, even though today this is allowing you to do these things, we have reservations that it'll be able to continue to do that over the long term that you're going to want to do this. So there are times when we may have to have that discussion with somebody to say, I'm glad that you're there, but I think we should try one more thing to see and then to maintain that. Although I have to be honest that I do have people that are long-term, 10 ply is probably an extreme, but I do have people that have used a prosthesis for a long period of time that want to have a fitting sock, and sometimes even want to have a thicker fitting sock than that, like me clinically would think is the best.
I think that's a good example, though. If you started with a 8-ply or a 10-ply, and they stayed at an 8 or 10-ply, then that's just where they are.
That's just where they are.
But if you started with a lightweight sock or a 3-ply,
Right.
and they're at a 10-ply, and they've changed that much,
then we know their limb is still changing.
right? Then you're dealing with a changing limb, and then most likely, if you were to go to another hard test socket, their limb is again going to respond to those changes, and they might change even more.
Right.
So I think that's a good point to bring up, because if you start with 8-ply and they stay in 8-ply, then that's still a stable limb.
Right. So what are some common questions that people ask you about a test socket, like during the test socket? Do you notice any? I mean, you know, a lot of times people, I mean, I know a few people that like test socket fitting, but overall, even like patients that are long-term, they don't love the critical nature of going through the process. I mean, I know a lot of people that are just like, they know about it, they know the value of it, but they're still just like, well, why can't we just skip this step?
Is it always going to be this heavy?
Right. Well, that's a great one. That's a great one. And that's a real, I mean, we always would say that, the test socket's not designed to be that final prosthesis. So it is absolutely heavier than the final prosthesis would be. So if they ask, like, is this what the final prosthesis would feel like? You know, you want to try to explain that, you know, your steps should feel the same. The pressures on your limb should feel the same, but that weight that you're carrying around with you, that anchor that's made hopefully, I tease people all the time that this is our strength training program. Yeah. But by the time you get that in your definitive prosthesis, you're going to be so strong that you're going to be able to walk, you know, this much further because you've been carrying this. It's like, you know, warming up to bat, and they used to put those batting donuts on the end of their bat so they could, you know, so that their bat would be that much faster when they, I mean, they found that it's all kind of a myth, and I think this is probably a myth with a test socket too, which is why I tease people with it. But it's a, but that's absolutely.
Although there are times if you get people, they went from the preparatory prosthesis to the test socket fitting process, then you give them a carbon fiber socket and they're high stepping a little bit.
Those are one of my favorite. Doing this so long, those are one of my favorite moments. Is when somebody gets in their definitive prosthesis and they take that first step, and it's almost like a march step, and they're just gonna look in their eyes like, this is so much less effort than I've been putting into this.
Energy efficiency.
Right. So, I mean, do you think that there's a bad question for people to ask during preparatory or during test socket fitting?
No.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I mean, the only bad question is the one you didn't ask, right? That's the only bad question.
Right.
I mean, this is the time for you to learn. This is the time for you to engage, be as engaged in the process as you possibly can be.
I mean, you know, ask about feet, ask about suspension, you know, all these different things. I mean, to your point, and I think you kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, you want to end up with the best prosthesis that you can have. And if, you know, the prosthesis is never going to be as good as your original leg.
Right.
And there's going to, you know, if you fall short a little bit, you want to know that you tried everything so you got the best prosthesis that you can. That's why we try all these different things, and so that you know that when you ended up where you ended up, at least you tried everything, and that you had the, you know, you tried tried different suspensions, you tried different feet.
So I mean, that kind of tells me, like, I mean, what do we think about failure in a test socket when a test socket doesn't work? I mean, do we consider that to be a negative thing?
I mean, it's not failure if it's in a test socket, because this is the trial and error period. This is when we find out, okay, we found out that this doesn't work, so we went on to the next. I mean, if we're talking about like a different suspension system or a foot, or this is when we find out what we just move on to the next step.
Right. I mean, so like, because it's a learning process, that thing that may look like failure is still information.
Exactly.
And it's still going to inform
It's a diagnostic process.
Yep, and it's still going to inform the process. That thing that may look like failure is going to actually make your prosthesis fit better.
We just learned what not to do.
Yes, correct. So, we talked about the importance of these extended trials. We talked about, some of these things. When are times that maybe that process isn't what we follow? When would that not be the right thing to do?
During the test socket?
Yeah.
Well,
especially like an extended trial.
I mean, like during the preparatory prosthesis. I mean, our goal when we're fitting a preparatory prosthesis, when we're making the definitive prosthesis, we're trying to design a prosthesis we're custom designing a prosthesis that's going to suit you and your lifestyle and all the activities that you do. When we're designing a preparatory prosthesis, our goal is we're fighting limb atrophy, and you haven't been up on your feet for 8, 10, 12 weeks, maybe longer. And our goal at that point in time is to get you up on your feet as quickly as possible. Now, we talked about your fighting limb volume, right? And all these other things. No matter what we do, when we fit you with a preparatory prosthesis, that limb is going to change no matter what.
Right.
Because you've got the swelling after surgery, your alignment, all those things, that's all subject to change during this process. One of the biggest justifications we have for the prosthesis is we know your limb's going to change. We know the alignment's going to change. The whole thing is made to be adjustable. So getting you up on your feet as fast as possible, that's the number one goal of the preparatory prosthesis.
Right.
Completely different when we're designing a definitive prosthetic.
Right. I mean, it's never really going to be in your best interest to have an urgent delivery deadline for a definitive prosthesis, right? Things that happen and life occurs. And
there could be extenuating circumstances.
Sure, but it's still not. But it's
in most cases, no.
In most cases, it's going to be in your best interest to be able to let this process play out and make
if your insurance expires in a month and you're not going to have insurance anymore,
right?
Like I said, extenuating circumstances.
There's certainly reasons why it would be the course that's chosen, but it's still you're still kind of probably sacrificing something in the long term, right?
Yep.
So. I guess I'd like to really just go back and reiterate that the test socket is a very important part of the design prosthesis for your process for your prosthesis, and that it really is the way that we can as clinicians can make sure that your prosthesis is going to fit and function the way that you need it to in your everyday life.
Well, one of the things I was going to say, we may not have said this directly, but a lot of times with test sockets, they'll say that the insurance companies will usually pay for two.
Oh, right.
And I think we've alluded that, we may do multiple test socket fittings. A lot of times we'll do more than two test socket fittings. With these insurance companies, if you state the medical justification and what it is that we're looking for during the test socket fitting process, they will pay for more tests. Not all insurance companies, but oftentimes they will. So
often their policies will say things like, we cover this many unless it's medically necessary.
So if you document that and you state what different things you're trying, or a lot of times too, nailing them down to the limb volume change. I mean, that's a big one.
Right, it's a big one.
And pointing out that you're saving them money.
Right.
I mean, if you're dealing with, like we talked about, that you were in a lightweight socket, now you're 10 ply. I mean, you could be billing them for a socket replacement in 2 months if you went right to the definitive prosthesis.
Right.
And hey, I'm doing this extended trial period with the test socket for 3 months in my office, and I'm doing the insurance, actually doing them a big justification by billing you for a test socket as opposed to a socket replacement. So I thought I would mention that.
Yep.
So.
And that's all very important. And I mean, the next thing I'd say is that we really want to continue to encourage people to consider themselves active participants in this process. Your feedback, your questions, you kind of clearly stating your goals, all those things are going to be really important in making sure that you get the prosthesis that you need to function in your everyday life. Like, this is the time when things are the most adjustable, when you have the most input on what you're going to get. So, this is the time to really hone in and put on that critical, part of your brain and for lack of a better term, nitpick.
Yeah, you're not going to hurt our feelings.
Little thing with your prosthesis during that test socket fitting phase. Once you get your prosthesis, there's probably a little bit of something where, oh, I feel this thing, but I haven't felt it ever before. I felt it today. I didn't feel it tomorrow. Okay, we don't hyper focus on those. But during that test socket fitting phase, this is the time to really hyper focus on everything you're feeling, how things change over time, all that stuff.
These things are normal. You're not, it's not being a bother. It's not hurting anyone's feelings, and it's not the prosthetist not doing their job right. It's that limb is going through changes, and it's not abnormal. Like, say you had the preparatory prosthesis and you were in 12 ply socks, 15 ply socks, and you've got all these buildups. Now you got this hard test socket, and that limb's going through change in shape again because you've got all this contact. Another thing that can happen with the test socket fitting process, say you're in a pin locking system. You've got all this soft tissue in there. You go through a few different test sockets. Now you're just milking all this soft tissue, and you got all this soft tissue distal to the bone. 3-4 test sockets in, you find out you're switching to a suction socket or something because that soft tissue isn't. You're finding out and doing diagnosing and finding. You've got to find the solution to what the right suspension system is to control these changes in that socket, and the test socket is the time to do it. Voice your concerns, and that's the only way you're going to find the solution to these problems.
Yeah, exactly. So hope you enjoyed our episode on test sockets. If you want more information about test sockets or about this process, feel free to visit our website, www.bremerprosthetics.com. Check us out on YouTube, check us out on Facebook, and feel free to ask questions in any of those formats, and we'll make sure that we can engage with you and do our best to answer them. We want to kind of tease the next episode, which is going to be talking about the preparatory prosthesis. And after that, we'll be talking about a definitive prosthesis and kind of how those all shape your experience with the prosthesis. So thanks a lot.